in recent years. A couple of things that could be assessed is first, justifications for waivers, year after year after year of waivers. The second thing that could be looked at here is what programs that the U.S. has put money into have actually reaped actual tangible results promoting religious freedom. Where do we see actual difference anywhere on the ground?
And so to that point, do you see any place where our funding and our non-imposition of our own domestic policies on these nations have actually produced more religious freedom in any of these nations that we're looking at?
Well, in some cases, what you're doing is just trying to keep the door open or open new doors. But one case, and Congressman Chris Smith has a lot to say on this specific case, is the one time where we did a semi-binding compact, almost like a Millennium Challenge Corporation type of thing, but on religious freedom. The one time was with Vietnam. And Vietnam came off the CPC list, but because they promised to do some things, they had about a year or two of progress. They actually went back on the CPC list eventually because they reneged on that. But there's a case of success.
Okay, and I hate to bring this up, but as one of the witnesses has said, words do have consequences, they have meaning. And the implication to call the travel ban a religious travel ban continues to be a narrative that actually is a vile lie. That narrative is a vile lie. The travel ban of 2019 was imposed originally under the Obama administration, 2015. They undertook a great deal of study. 50 nations were included in that original ban, including Chad. But after Chad increased its ability for us to share and vet people coming in from Chad, Chad was removed from that list. The Supreme Court addressed this, and they concluded that the proclamation was neutral on its face regarding religion and applied to people of all faiths. So it undermines one's credibility to continue with this pernicious lie. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Moskowitz.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the conversation. In 2022, the Anti-Defamation League said there were 3,697 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States. That was a 36% increase from 2021, just the year before. I think it was an excellent decision by President Biden to elevate the position of the head of the special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism to an ambassador at large. You know, when my Republican colleagues cozy up to neo-Nazis and the Proud Boys and white supremacist groups.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, I find that offensive that the gentleman would make a broad statement like that. And I think that he should back that up with any individual, but not a broad group. That would be inappropriate for me and untrue.
Don't worry, I'm getting to the part you'll like.
Well, I don't. Okay. Perhaps you are. I find it offensive that you have used this forum.
Sure, no problem. Donald Trump had dinner with a Holocaust denier at his house. You want more facts?
Then use that, sir.
Sure, no problem. When my Republican colleagues support a president of the United States who's having dinner with a Holocaust denier at his house and they remain silent, silence is complicity. When there are Nazis,
Mr. Sessions.
I would like my time back,
Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm sure you'll get that back. Broad statements are inappropriate and are not worthy of this hearing.
I know you're in denial that he had dinner with a Holocaust
I was
denier.
unaware of it. So for you to assume that
that was national news for like a week.
That matters not. Okay. What I'm trying to say, Mr. Chairman, is this hearing needs to stay very cordial and very much on the level. And attacks like this are exactly why our country is going through what we're going through. And
Mr. Chairman, there needs to be a point of order actually in this.
There's no point of order. I called nobody out other than the former president of the United States, Donald Trump.
That is not correct, sir. You referred to Republicans.
Mr. Chairman, there needs to be a point of order, please.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that you please admonish the people of this subcommittee and that we're trying to make progress together.
Mr. Chairman, there needs to be a point of
Deny
order.
each other.
Yeah, and I'd like my time back, Mr.
We,
Chairman.
we need a point of order. You will get your time back. We're not running the clock. Okay. If there's no point of order, just continue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll go back to what I was previously saying, is that when Republican colleagues, not all of them, but some Republican colleagues cozy up to neo-Nazis and the Proud Boys and white supremacist groups.
Mr. Chairman, I would like for you to please.
Sir, there's no point of order
we
here.
need a point of order.
I know this is
Okay.
uncomfortable, but I want to get through this. So it's just a paragraph, and we'll be fine. So much for free speech. When some of my Republican colleagues cozy up to neo-Nazis, Proud Boys, and white supremacist groups because they are their voters, and when President Trump hosts Holocaust deniers at Mar-a-Lago, sometimes we hear silence from our friends on the right. When Nazis are holding rallies in the streets, when mass murderers go into synagogues or grocery stores and have Nazi symbols or anti-Semitic dossiers under white nationalism or Christian nationalism, we actually don't hear silence, we hear denial. But don't worry, I want to make this committee bipartisan, because this is a bipartisan issue. Anti-Semitism is bipartisan. And there is plenty of bipartisan silence of what's happening to Jews in this country on the left. Gas the Jews, kill the Jews, glory to the martyrs, celebrating Hamas killing of innocent people at GW last night, my alma mater. Glory to the martyrs, glory to the people that raped women, that killed babies in their cribs. Glory to those people. Bring back Hitler. Jews are not wanted. No wonder the Germans killed them. Zionism is a mental illness. No wonder why Hitler wanted to get rid of them. Fuck the Jews. Posters of children hostages being pulled down all over the country. Swastikas coming back, not just at rallies, but people are just wearing them. Cheering in the street after rape, killing babies, using rape as a cause of resistance, burning people alive like they did in concentration camps to bring back the smell of burning Jews. We are constantly told that you can be critical of Israel's policies without being anti-Semitic. Except that's not what we're seeing in the street. We're not seeing from the progressive left them saying, you know, Israel. No, they're saying the Jews, right? We're constantly told, no, you can criticize a country's policies and positions. It's not about a religion. It's not about an elimination of people, except that's not what they're saying. That's not what they're doing. All being done in the cause of resistance or progressive values. And again, while it's not all of my members, silence from the progressive left. You know, I get it. Jews don't look like the usual victim. We don't look like victims. No, we look more like oppressors. And in social media, where everything is, you know, binary, right? We don't like complicated arguments, right? And where facts don't matter anymore because folks like Elon Musk took away all of the guardrails, and where anti-Semitism and racism and hatred is just breeding on social media. It is no wonder why what we're seeing now scares the Jewish community, because we have not seen this since the Holocaust. You know, it's because Jews are subhuman. That's what it is. It is a double standard that is only applied to us, and both parties are failing because, you know what, each of them have no problem calling out anti-Semitism when the other side does it, right? The Republicans will call out the Squad. Democrats will call out, you know, Republican members when they say, you know, Jews and space lasers. No, we have no problem doing it on the other side, because that's easy, super easy to criticize the other side. No, but it is much harder to do it when it's within your own ranks. Much harder to do it within your own ranks. That's when we see the silence. And so, I'll conclude, Mr. Chairman. You know, Jews have often wondered why it took so long for people to come to their aid during the Holocaust, why millions of people were slaughtered before people came to their aid. Now we know. Now we know why it took so long. And we also now know, because we see it in this country, in the streets and in the halls of Congress, we now know who those people are who wouldn't come to our aid now if that happened again. I yield back.
Mr. Fallon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. It's so vitally important. There was a Prussian diplomat, Clemens Wenzel First, and we know him by his last name, von Metternich. And he said that when France sneezes, the world catches a cold. And now that term has been applied to the United States, of course. When we sneeze, the world catches a cold. So what we do here really does matter. And it's not just for the 340 million people in this country, but it's for billions across the world. I had a friend of mine in my 20s. He's an American. He was born in Iran. His father still lived in Iran, and he said he can't go back because they might press him into military service and might punish his father and just take all his possessions after working for 50 years of his life, because that's what theocracies, authoritarian theocracies, tend to do. And it really opened my eyes as somebody that has experienced the blessings and bounties of this country when we have a big moat called the Atlantic and a bigger one called the Pacific, and we're protected. And we don't realize that you don't have to go back to 1500 or 1000 AD to see this kind of religious oppression and persecution. It's happening right here in this world in 2023. So we not only live in the right place, we do live in the right time, but some people live in the wrong place, and still in 2023, for some folks, it's the wrong time. Nothing to me is more important than a human being being able to worship the Almighty to the dictates of their own conscience. I think that's why we're all here. That's why it's a little upsetting to hear this kind of partisan gutter politics that then morphed into something sane. So what I wanted to do is ask a couple of questions about it, because I really would hope this would be bipartisan, and our office is going to draft a letter that hopefully will get Republicans and Democrats to sign on to it. So the International Religious Freedom Act, which allows the Secretary of State to designate countries that commit systematic and ongoing egregious violations of religious freedom. These countries of particular concern, CPCs. Mr. Curry, in Afghanistan, if you are born or you are raised Muslim and you leave that faith, can you face egregious consequences?
Absolutely. In many countries, including Afghanistan, you're not allowed to change your faith. In some countries, you're forced to register and never. You can't choose a faith of your own. But both culturally and politically, it's not allowed in Afghanistan.
What if somebody wanted to build I asked Mr. Patterson, or Dr. Patterson, sorry, if we wanted to build a Jewish temple in Kabul today under the Taliban? What do you think would happen?
Yeah, impossible.
Would not happen.
And you'd probably face the death penalty.
Okay. So that's pretty egregious, wouldn't you all agree? Dr. Mobbs, yeah. Ms. Taylor, you'd agree? Yeah. Mr. Curry, is Afghanistan designated as a CPC?
Yes.
It is? Okay. What other countries would you feel should be designated in or not?
Well, I think, one country that I would highlight for you that has been designated as a CPC but has been given waivers would be India. This is a country that we want to have strong partnership. We have lots of business relationships with. But surprisingly, this democracy is one of the foremost persecutors of religious minorities. Christians and Muslims in India face great repression from the political movement there. And so if I could highlight anything as it relates to CPC, it's India, countries like it, which are designated, but there's no teeth to it because the State Department continues to waive the consequences.
Dr. Mobbs, Russia, of course, is in the news every day because of their illegal and grotesque invasion of Ukraine. Why do you, so the Russian Orthodox Church, Putin, who was a secularist for his entire life and then suddenly embraces Christianity, why do you think they're persecuting particularly Jehovah's Witnesses so severely?
I think they're just willing to persecute anyone that doesn't do exactly what he says.
Just if you get out of line, so you can be, if you're Russian Orthodox, is it more toward just kind of accentuating the Russian identity and ethnicity? Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, my time's up. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Porter.
Dr. Patterson, could you summarize the purpose of this hearing as it was intended to be held?
The purpose of the hearing, as I understand it, is to look at the national security implications of U.S. international religious freedom policy in the state of the globe.
Okay. And Dr. Mobbs?
That's my understanding as well.
Okay, so the summary that I have says, this hearing will examine the administration's oversight of assistance to organizations promoting religious freedom for oppressed religious minorities and others persecuted. The hearing will also examine how global religious persecution presents national security concerns. So one of our top goals today is to have the United States government stop organizations that persecute religious minorities, correct? So if we want the United States to be successful in that, we need to understand exactly what religious persecution looks like. And many of you have given helpful examples today. I want to consider a different example. Let's say like that an organization creates a list of people that it fears is going to commit crimes. And we have that organization says in writing that it's not using religious affiliation. It's just about crimes. But we see the list, we do the analysis, and we can confirm that 98% of the people on the list are part of a single religious minority. Dr. Patterson, could that be an example of the type of religious persecution that we're trying to prevent with this hearing?
If I understand the parameters of what you just said, I think one of the things that we would be concerned about was that, as I understand it, you're talking about preventing a future wrong by going after this group rather than them having committed any crime in the first place. And of course, that's a much larger legal principle that we don't want to go after preventing someone that we might think might do something down the road.
And definitely not based on their, if the main guiding fact seems to be to get on this list being a particular religion as opposed to anything that someone has done, we would be concerned about that. Dr. Mobbs, what do you think about that? Would you want to know more at least?
I would want to know more.
Okay. Ms. Tyler, how about you?
Yes, I mean, I think that hypothetical talks about how one could use religion as a proxy for a security threat, which is a way of singling out a single religion for government disfavor.
Mr. Curry, excuse me.
As I understand it, yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So at the beginning of this hearing, we said it's the United States' duty to do oversight of religious persecution. I gave an example of that we think could at least raise concerns. Let's say we find out that the organization making this list is the FBI and that the religious minority is Muslims. This is a real-life example. A copy of the FBI's terrorism watch list was leaked, and an analysis showed that 98% of the names on that list are those of Muslim people. Now that we have this specific, do you still think that we should do oversight and the administration should do diligence to make sure that the FBI watch list is targeting people based on risk and not on religion? Ms. Tyler?
Absolutely. I think if we are to defend religious freedom around the world, we must be sure that our government is also defending religious freedom here at home.
Dr. Mobbs?
Absolutely. Being placed on a list should be based on behaviors, predictions, risk analysis, and should not be predicated on religion at all.
Dr. Patterson?
I concur, and I think it's exactly right for Congress to be doing oversight in the first place over the executive branch.
Mr. Curry?
Yes.
So we have a strong consensus here, and I hope my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will join with me in asking that the administration give us more information about how they've constructed this list and why the list seems to be based on religion. And if it's not true, that they're able to explain that and answer that to us. We have a duty as a country to do that kind of oversight to stop persecution, and we do not have credibility internationally to take on the kinds of challenges that you've described today if we are not doing it here. We've heard it today from witnesses, Republican and Democrat alike, that religious persecution harms our national security. And that is just as true when we may be missing or under-identifying national security threats to our own country internally because we are using religion as a basis to identify people for the terrorism watch list. The committee needs to keep pressing on a bipartisan basis to do oversight on the FBI's terrorism watch list until this issue is fixed or until our questions are answered. I yield back.
First of all, I'd like to submit for the record 3 articles here, one on these topics, one from Heritage Society, one from Newsweek, and one from the Providence Journal. And then Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the committee's interest in protecting people of faith abroad. Sadly, this administration's persecution of Christians here at home strips them of any credibility whatsoever in fighting religious discrimination abroad. The Department of Justice under this administration has indicted at least 34 people of protesting outside abortion clinics under the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrance Acts. Many pro-lifers face years behind bars. One man, Mark Hoke, was arrested in front of his wife and 7 children in an unnecessary and brutal raid where FBI agents brandished their weapons at the family. Multiple FBI field offices worked together to construct a memo that encouraged the infiltration and targeting of Catholic worshipers. The DOJ threatened states that passed laws protecting children from mutilation and harmful chemical infusions. Biden signed a law last year that perverted the federal definition of marriage. The U.S. military refused to grant thousands of brave service members a religious exemption to the COVID-19 vaccine. Health and Human Services seeking to limit the ability of employers to oppose to providing contraceptive coverage for religious reasons to refrain from violating their conscience. January 6 prisoners have claimed that federal prison officials have prevented them from attending religious services. Meanwhile, rioters who destroyed property to the tune of $2 billion in the Summer of Love and pro-abortion terrorists who firebombed pro-life pregnancy centers roam free. This administration should start with itself when it comes to eradicating religious freedom. Now, question, Mr. Curry, does the persecution of Christians here at home by this administration undermine the ability of advocates to help prosecute Christians abroad?
Congressman, I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. My expertise is on international persecution.
Dr. Patterson?
Do you mind saying the question one more time?
Yeah, does the persecution of Christians here at home by this administration undermine the ability of advocates to help persecute Christians abroad?
I'd say that the persecution of people of faith at home does undermine our efforts abroad.
Would you agree, Dr. Mobbs?
I would agree, yes.
Ukraine has taken procedural steps to ban their Ukrainian Orthodox Church over alleged ties to Russia. Zelensky has sanctioned several leaders of the Church of Ukraine. Ukraine's constitutional court unilaterally changed the name of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. A government body meddling in the affairs of a church to the extent of renaming should be utterly an anathema to any person of goodwill. A Christianity Today article from just a couple of days ago claims that the Ukrainian National Police, known as the SBU, have accused 68 Church of Ukraine priests of collaboration, treason, and other offenses. The Ukrainian citizenship of 20 of these priests was revoked. Are you concerned, Dr. Mobes, that the Ukrainian government is violating the religious liberty of its citizens?
I would say anytime you have any violation of anyone's religious liberties, we should be concerned.
How about you, Dr. Patterson?
I agree with that statement.
Since it's international, Mr. Curry?
Yes, both the Russian side and the Ukrainian side are using religion as a wedge, and it's unacceptable.
I see the same thing. You're exactly right. The Ukrainian Security Service orchestrated a raid on the Russian Orthodox Christian monastery in Kiev in November of 2022. Is this what a democratic country that respects freedom of religion looks like, Dr. Mobbs?
Unfortunately, I don't know anything about that raid, sir.
Okay, how about you, Dr. Patterson?
I don't know about that specific case.
No? Okay. Well, the Media Research Center recently broke a story detailing how the Department of Homeland Security approved of a grant to Dayton College under a program meant to fight all forms of terrorism and targeted violence. Money from the grant was used to produce a seminar where a DHS agent included the Christian Broadcasting Network, along with other conservative entities like the Heritage and Fox News, in a pyramid of far-right radicalization. Another presenter of this group was an Antifa member who admitted proudly that his group often breaks the law. I'm curious to get the panel's take on how protecting religious freedom at the home will complement congressional and executive pressures to protect the people of faith abroad. Could you comment on that, Dr. Mobbs?
I think that it's very clear that what we do here echoes elsewhere. So in order for us to be a model around the world, we have to ensure that we're doing what we're doing here at home, which is allowing religious freedom and protecting all of the constitutional rights enshrined in our Constitution.
How about you, Dr. Patterson?
I agree with that statement, and it's particularly worrying when people glorify lawlessness and violence as if that is somehow something that's positive. We can't hand that on to our children.
Well, I applaud the lady from the gentlelady from California, because she's right on target with where this needs to go. Because we have to look at home as well as abroad, and our law enforcement agencies are no similar person. They have to be looked at very intensely. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank our witnesses for being here. I want to give a little bit of a perspective from an American Jew right now, from New York City, which has the highest population of Jews outside of Israel in the world. What happened on October 7th was an effort by an extremist jihadist terrorist organization to kill as many Jews as possible. And for someone like me, who has grown up in this country, hearing about stories of the Holocaust, stories of the pogroms in Europe, from which my grandmother escaped to come to the United States, it has always been historical. But today, we are living with the reality of the same thing. And it is difficult being a Jew in America right now. There are mass protests against Jews who suffered from a terrorist attack. There are dramatically increased threats, and in many ways, it feels very isolating. And so in large respect, I appreciate having this hearing today, because we do need to make sure that we are addressing the persecution and discrimination and hate against all religious groups. And I appreciate that my colleague from Arizona raised some issues in terms of some of the Christian groups, but obviously it's not limited to Christians. There is horrific anti-Semitism, and there's horrific Islamophobia that is going on, including the awful murder of a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy in Illinois. And Dr. Patterson, I think your statement is right. We cannot pass this on to our children. And so I'm grateful that you are all here to discuss what has to be a unified anti-hate platform among all religions, among all ethnicities, among all races, so that we get back to the foundational principles of this country and of this great democracy, that we are all created equal and we all have an opportunity to succeed and to thrive regardless of our religion. I want to ask just a couple of questions, Ms. Tyler, because this is a global fight, but it is obviously also a domestic fight. And there is domestic extremism that we're now seeing on both sides. And I'm curious what you think we can do in Congress to assist the administration's efforts to ensure that people of faith are free to worship without fear of attack here in the United States?
I mean, I think it starts with the rhetoric that's used in Congress. I think that people follow what they hear here. And so it's important that we as a country live up to the values that we've established in our Constitution and also in who we are as a people, that we don't use rhetoric that dehumanizes other people, that we don't claim that God is on the side of any side of any war, and that we take care of civilians and we don't equate civilians with the governments of their countries. And I think any attempt to try to use religion or religious people to justify a particular government policy has the ability to first harm religion, but also to spread violence and hatred in the country. And so I think that Congress has a very important role to play, both in debate that happens here and also in the instructions and the oversight that Congress plays with the administration.
Thank you for that thoughtful response. And Mr. Curry, in my last few seconds, because of your expertise in the international realm, I'm curious how you think or how you perceive domestic religious extremism and discrimination has an impact abroad.
I think anytime we look at international religious freedom, what I'm trying to do is hold up the international standard that people have the freedom to associate, to choose their own faith and to practice it freely. I would say that standard should hold for us as well here.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I think what I'm going to do is we'll just go to closing statements. Mr. Garcia, do you want to say anything?
No, I'll just want to thank the witnesses again, but I do want to just reiterate the point earlier that I think the Biden administration is, and the State Department is rebuilding a lot of these programs. I do want to commend them for calling out, particularly at this really difficult moment, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and all the attacks on other minorities happening across the world and countries. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here. I wish we would have spent a little bit more time focusing on Americans' involvement in what are normally religious matters in other countries. Once met a woman here who was appointed by President Trump who felt that the pushing of, let's say, a Planned Parenthood agenda in Africa was largely racially driven, but was certainly opposed by the primarily Christian churches in Africa at the time. I think Dr. Patterson, wish I had time to do a follow-up question, but pointed out that apparently some loans that Western country or the United States was giving out, as opposed to Chinese loans, were conditioned upon things that were sometimes against religious beliefs held in these third world countries. We've talked about the concern in Hungary for kind of an anti-traditional Christian worldview held by the United States. I think there were some kind of outlandish statements made by people on the other side, but right now I think we are seeing around the world anti-Semitism, but to a certain extent an anti-Semitism born of kind of an anti-Western worldview, and for whatever reason, young people, very disturbingly, are drawn into that for whatever psychological reason. I think I saw kids with T-shirts that were just shocking in our own Cannon building the other day. You know, kind of hard to believe why young people would be drawn into this, but I think there's kind of a self-hatred towards Western values here that young people are drawn to. But in any event, I encourage people to pay a little bit more attention to the United States. They're getting involved in what are normally religious issues or religious beliefs in other countries, and I think there's an element of kind of an atheistic, humanistic worldview that's kind of becoming the official religion of some people around the United States, and that's a horrible thing. But in any event, I know you guys took a lot of time out of your busy days to be here today. So thank you one more time.